Now is the time to live life inspired. You're listening to Carey Pena Reports. Hi, everyone. I'm Carey Pena, and thank you so much for listening to Carey Pena Reports. We focus on stories that inspire, and I have a very inspirational woman sitting in front of me right now, one of my friends from the television business, Kristine Harrington, who works as a producer at AZFamily, 3TV, and Channel 5. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
We have to talk about this documentary that you were part of called Empty Seats, Full Hearts. And this is about a principal here in the Valley, in Arizona, in Phoenix, who fought hard for her students throughout the pandemic. I want to set the scene for our listeners about this documentary. And then we will talk about how incredible it is that you were able to get this made in a local news market.
Yeah, incredible that this station was wholly supportive and invested in this way, but then also that a school district would open up its doors and identify a school and say, sure, come along for the ride. I mean, these are unprecedented times. What could go wrong? And yet they allowed us to come in there with cameras and just roll and be a fly on the wall from the first day of school all the way through students finally returning in late spring. So that was also a huge feat to overcome.
They gave you all access.
They did.
Which is pretty incredible. So tell us about the school district and the principal.
Okay. So initially, when we set out to do this, we, of course, had no idea what we were going to get. And what emerged was definitely a story about a principal who is relentless and unflappable, I believe, just really able to rally her troops, inspire an entire community. And it's because of the relationships that she has developed in that community that so many others were willing to open their doors and welcome us into their homes and into their hearts and share with us their grief or their troubles, their worries, in addition to their celebrations. So I think it was really a testament to her and the work that she's done over a number of years that really provided us the greatest opportunity to tell this story and be present throughout all of it. Because that was what we weren't sure, again, what we were going to get, what sort of roadblocks we might encounter. Because again, this is a pandemic. And this was August 3rd that we first showed up to this school and met the principal for the first time outside of Zoom, face to face, and put a lav on her. And even that, putting equipment on her. This is a time when we were afraid of, touching each other and sanitizing everything. But then watching her go into homes and knowing that she was doing so maybe at some risk to herself, but nothing was going to stand between her and a student or a family in need.
Let's take a pause, and we're going to play a clip from your documentary.
When you're put in a crisis, I think it either makes you or breaks you. And I feel like our staff, it's making them.
This is why the documentary is intriguing to me, because you're telling the story of a quiet hero. These are the ones who behind the scenes, she would have done all of that, whether the camera was following her or not, of course. She wasn't asking for publicity. I think it is incredibly intriguing that the school district allowed it without parameters. And you also got some insight into just how scared the kids were.
Yeah, and it was interesting, to hear the students sort of articulate their understanding of COVID. And so whether, it was how desperately the kids all wanted to be back in school, teachers too, desperate to have kids back in school. It was sort of like everybody's hands were tied. And so they were just trying to make the best of a very difficult situation. But to hear, one kid say, and I love it, it was Alex Cordova, and he's like, pretty simple, COVID sucks. And, it's like, yeah, I mean, it is that simple. This sucks. So how do we try to make it better so that it isn't a year lost? Like, what do we do to help students grow? And I think there was a lot of growth in the adults too. There was a huge learning curve for everybody involved, and it didn't matter where you were. I mean, we chose, I targeted a school specifically in the Maryvale area because I knew that there were certain hotspots for coronavirus where transmission rates were higher. And so you maybe wouldn't have students return right away, and we would see how that conversation would be navigated. And so in that particular neighborhood, it was pretty typical that the positivity rate was north of 30%. That's a huge transmission rate. But again, you're talking about essential workers, multi-generational households, and all of that is what led to greater transmission rates. So there was just so much that these families were juggling even pre-pandemic, but then exacerbated by the pandemic. And so we knew when we were going to have conversations with different schools and request this opportunity to tell the story, that we wanted almost that to be a character, but not the main character. Coronavirus wasn't going to be the main character, but it was going to be sort of the catalyst for all the relationship building. And I think that was the greatest takeaway when the principal, Janet Hecht, and I spoke afterward, and I think she says it in the documentary too, is what was most stunning is how much stronger relationships are now on the backside, which is crazy. You would think, we all miss the face-to-face dialogue and everything else, but she wasn't going to homes in the same fashion. She wasn't being invited into living rooms and bedrooms in the same fashion, pre-pandemic. And so she feels like she knows these families so much better, and they know her so much better and believe and trust that there isn't anything that they wouldn't do for their kids.
And for folks who aren't familiar with Maryvale, who might be listening outside of Arizona, we have a lot of listeners around the country and around the world, in fact. So explain Maryvale, because you're talking about a lower income district.
Right. Absolutely. It's definitely a Title I school district, 90% plus minority, and it is working class for sure. And there is food scarcity, education inequities, a digital divide that existed pre-pandemic. And now all this did was exacerbate that. And I think shine an even brighter light on all of those issues that really needed to be addressed before, but now had to be addressed in real time. So they're essentially building this plane in the air, right? Trying to figure out how to get everybody online, get them hotspots, especially in households that have multiple children, how to maintain the bandwidth, and then how to make sure whoever's in that home can even troubleshoot. Because, many of these families, they don't work from home. They don't Zoom. They're going out and often working with their hands in our community, but they are what drives our economy and keeps it going. So these are people that could not stay home with their children. And so even how they were able to navigate daycare, or again, the extended family, bringing them in, but then again, making them vulnerable to whatever was being brought home from work.
What was your observation of the mental health and the emotional well-being of these children?
I think even today, that remains to be fully seen, because I think a lot of students, they put up a wall. And so what we saw is sometimes it's very obvious, the grief, because you've just lost somebody you love. But you didn't have to lose somebody to have profound grief come out of this. And I think none of us come out of 2020 or this pandemic unscathed. I think it affected all of us. You could be in the most affluent school district and have all the supports in the world, and yet this was hard. I'm a working mom, and those days at home, keeping my, 8-year-old engaged and sitting in front of her screen wasn't always easy. Even with my mom, who was a former teacher, it really takes everybody supporting one another. So no matter your circumstances, this was hard. And so there were so many students that had the obvious grief, but then there's so many others that were just, I think, bearing it. And now we're just starting to see the layers peel back. As the students come back and you can actually see them and their body language, it becomes more clear that there's a lot left to unpack. And so my hope is that this particular documentary is not only providing us a look back and sort of this time capsule, but rather a tool for how best we move forward and address some of the education inequities, the food scarcity, the digital divide, and the very real trauma and grief isolation, depression that all these students faced.
And so how do you think that your film can help instruct better practices going forward and more integration between school administrations and families?
Yeah, definitely. I think that this serves as a great model moving forward. I think, when we speak to the principal and Janet talks about how, she's visiting more homes than typical, that's not to say she never visited homes, but now they are much more, I think, even than before, tuned in to what the needs are of students and how much of it is buried beneath. And kids find it tough to articulate exactly what it is they're feeling. And so sometimes it's up to the adult to try to interpret that without forcing a label or without trying to, create a problem if there isn't one. But I do think that moving forward, there is definitely a stronger relationship in this community between parents and educators and a greater trust so that it's a two-way street. The educator feels trusted to approach the family and bring, different issues to their attention and, provide different solutions. But maybe even more importantly, the family feels more trusting to reach out to the school as a resource. And again, or at least directing them toward the next best resource if it was something outside of their hands. So hopefully that will serve as a tool. But I also hope that the takeaway is, because we're coming out of this year where anything could be politicized. And yet this story is really just about people that care deeply about their community and each other. And there's so much heart and so much humanity that can't be taught, but can be felt. I think it's palpable in every different scene. And my hope is that we come away from this understanding how hard educators work, because this is a microcosm. This is not unique to Maryvale, Phoenix. This is not unique to Justine Spitolni Elementary School. I think educators all around the globe were facing these same issues, trying to find those learners who were unaccounted for, trying to address the lives that were lost, the quarantined staff, the food scarcity. Again, I believe Spitolni is really just a microcosm of what was going on all around the world. And even, in my daughter's district and in our household to some degree. So my hope is that everybody can identify and relate in some way to this and will come out the other side better, understanding how we can address these things, the digital divide. I mean, think about it, we now have laptops in the hands of all these students who never had it before. In so many ways, they've shown so much greater growth. And maybe that growth can't be measured on a standardized test, but yet there's so much opportunity associated with the tools, the devices that were presented to these students. And my hope is that we can just continue to build on that and not go back.
Let's take another pause and listen to an additional clip. There's so much compelling sound, especially coming from the kids. Let's listen.
I tell myself every day that what we do matters, that loving them and working as hard as we do is going to be enough, that we are enough. Some days I don't feel like we're enough. So I have to really tell myself that there is good in the world and that we are part of that good. And that in the end, good is going to win.
For you personally, and you and I have worked in journalism together. We used to sit next to each other in the newsroom. And you are, I have to tell our audience, a great, dedicated journalist. And journalism has been under fire. And I know this project meant a lot to you. And I have to give kudos to my former bosses, who I love and respect very much, for giving the green light to this project. What was most impactful for you personally working on this project?
Well, yeah, I mean, I can't say enough about Arizona's family recognizing the opportunity to tell this story and then committing to do so, and not even pushing in and saying we need to get something on air now, but rather let's see where this goes and tell the very best story we can that is, fully representative of what is going on. And so that took great commitment. I think it was a huge ask and an even bigger yes coming from the Cartright School District opening their doors and allowing us to just be a fly on the wall, but also from Arizona's family committing the camera guys, committing, myself. I was used to having something in every newscast or at least a couple times a week. So that was something that would be lost in the day-to-day operations. But they recognized the bigger picture. And, let's hope we don't all live through another pandemic, right? Let's hope this really was a once-in-a-lifetime event. And kudos to Arizona's family for recognizing the power of the story, because there wasn't a do-over. We were there the first day and we committed to seeing it through. And in fact, the Cartright School District had voted, because of the transmission rate, to keep kids home the entire school year. It was the governor's executive order that brought the students back right after spring break. And so there were many times I thought, we're never going to see kids in this. I mean, we're just going to see them on a Zoom screen. And you've been in classrooms, whether it's your own children or because you're reporting, there's just this energy. I mean, the classroom is where the magic happens. And yet you could find these connections between teachers and students. Kelsey Morales is a first-year teacher, and to hear her engaging with the kids, and then one little girl chime in and she says, I keep getting them right. And then, and Kelsey says, good job. And then she goes, I'm like smart now. And that was just like everything, because no matter how you look at it, everyone was trying, and that engagement remained. And so, absolutely there was, there's academic gaps that will have to be filled in, but we hope coming out of it that there's maybe a tighter community and a better understanding of really what's most important, and hopefully mental health can be addressed then moving forward. But for Arizona's family to wholly commit in this fashion was huge, because we had 4 photographers that were kind of dipping in and out, but one primarily who was there with me for sure 3 days a week. And it was a mindset shift for all of us, because we're used to showing up and we think, okay, we'll listen to the whole press conference, but we're going to pull a soundbite or two, and then we know we can move on to the next thing. And in this case, you just show up and you roll on everything, because you don't get that moment between Kelsey and a little girl saying, I'm like smart now, unless you've rolled all day. You don't know when these moments are going to happen. And so I think that was, sort of difficult for all of us, because some days we felt like, what are we getting? And especially for me, if I don't have the headset on, I don't know until we go back and listen. And then you find this really compelling sound. And when we were there's one moment where we went to the Garcia's house, and Kathy's mom, and she has 9 kids. And again, challenges exist with one kid, but now times 9. And, not everybody has their own desk, so they're all around the kitchen table. How you manage sound. So like the school getting everybody headphones so that there can at least be some isolation and greater focus. The one, teacher making those boards so that, again, they won't get distracted by their siblings. And then you see Emilio come in and, and Janet, the principal, sitting down across from him, and he's now in the middle school, and yet she's like, once a tiger, always a tiger. And I think his eyes alone, Emilio's eyes, tell this whole story. And he even says, I miss being in the classroom. I mean, kids long for that. For that connection to another adult who's so vested in their success, and they know that they're safe and they're secure and they're learning. There's so much empowerment in a classroom, and so you could see their thirst to get back there. And I just think that was really neat, and to see her encourage Emilio to keep trying and to be the model, moving forward. But, you talk about the kids and the story that they told, and a lot of times it was just in their eyes. And, it just seeing sort of just this sadness. The loss was very real, and you could just see it in their eyes.
What was the one thing you learned from the principal, Janet, and her leadership? Obviously, she has really strong leadership skills.
Yeah, I mean, for sure, it's all about relationships. She would say that over and over again, and I think it's evident, in her approach for sure. But I will tell you, the one thing about her is she's always a cheerleader. And I would ask her time and time again, like, when do you break? Like, do you ever allow yourself a chance? Like, I don't know, is it in the shower that you just cry it out? Or, how is it that you manage? Because she carries so much weight on her shoulders. There has to be that moment. And she told me if she broke, then it would open the floodgates. That was her feeling. So her role was very much to keep everyone moving forward and to be optimistic and, again, focused on solutions as opposed to sort of the dire situation at hand. And I loved that about her, because then she also told me how important it is self-care. And I think a lot of times we really do get focused on what has to be done, and we forget to take care of ourselves. But if we're not taking care of ourselves, then nothing's going to get done, right?
Yes.
And so she said it was just even in her drive, listening to music. She's very strong faith. And so listening to, certain music that is especially meaningful to her. And then again, going to that ice skating rink and watching her daughter skate. It used to be one of those things, those tedious errands that parents do, driving from soccer or this or that, the other, shuttling your kids around. And yet, as soon as that was taken away from her, she realized how much she actually loved, being there and watching, her daughter excel at something she loved. And so I think it was learning again, or having her reinforce just how important relationships are, but then taking the time to slow down and appreciate what you have. I hope all of us come away recognizing that we actually each of us have so much. And if you just slow down and take a breath and look around and find the joy in every moment, I think you'll be better for it moving forward. And that was definitely something I walk away from this project finding myself doing more so of, because clearly no day is promised, right? And so making the most of each of them, trying to leave your mark as best you can on the world. So it's a better place, and hopefully you've improved some lives along the way. And then just finding the joy and loving yourself, giving yourself the grace.
Well, you guys did an incredible job, and I commend you for the hard work, the dedication, and staying the course, because you believed in this project, and this project will shine the light in places that it needs to shine.
Yeah.
And I think that that's a really important point you make. Kristine Harrington, the film is Empty Seats, Full Hearts, and where can folks find that film?
We have it on YouTube. Mm-hmm. It is on YouTube right now. We've played it a couple times now on Channel 3, but I'm sure it'll come around again. But right now on YouTube, you can find the link. And on AZFamily.com, there's an Empty Seats, Full Hearts page that has a bunch of information, some credits, and then more information on how this came to be, and some biographical information on some of our casts and crew. So
you rock, sister. Thank you so much for coming in. And thanks to all of you for listening. I'm Carey Pena. Take good care.